I it's not the moment actually to make kind of like rash decisions. I think like one has to be very sensitive to like the mood of the market, and we basically have a lot of advertising. So most of our revenue comes from advertising.
Okay.
So and I follow a lot of people from the advertising industry, and I see that they're trying to as well figure out what to do, figure out how they can help their brands, and what type of messaging kind of they have to craft in order to kind of don't rub people the wrong way, because especially the first 4 weeks it was I think everybody was very sensitive, very shocked, and like this uncertainty. Some people like it's not some people, but I think like overall the general population was like, okay, what's going on? Like governments are
Yeah.
shutting down. This has been like completely unprecedented, So
Yeah.
like at some point, I personally had a moment where like I felt kind of like the weight of the whole situation kind of like on my shoulders, as well as recently being a dad and everything, and having to support my family. So I was like, oh man, so what's gonna happen, But I mean, I do believe that, and I saw this on a podcast that somebody said, okay, this marks the end of the industrial era, and is the beginning kind of like the digital or knowledge or information era. So there is some truth to that. Obviously, I think we were already in that transition, but it's just sped up everything. So this kind of like digital podcast, or
Yeah.
a lot of people jumping into social media right now, and people getting used to being on camera, and these new ways of working, in the digital space, and all these frictions that companies and products are going to start to remove. I think it's a great leap forward somehow.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, what you mentioned about this being a leap forward, and also, the messaging around like you know, how you speak to people, especially in advertising or when you're doing sales or lead generation. It is a tough line to walk, because the fact is, in crises, there's always actually a tons of opportunity. It's a massive shakeup. But with that said, you don't want to seem opportunistic. Like, you don't want to come across as, taking advantage of the situation. But actually, collectively, we should all be taking advantage of the situation, right? But it's tough because simultaneously there's tons of people who are having a rough time, and who are going to have a rough time for years to come, or who have died from this. So it's a really tough line to walk. And I think that there's going to be some sensitive weeks and months, but ultimately, like, we've got to all figure out like how to, like, I think now the great pause is a good time to reflect, and maybe not, go out there with a megaphone and, but I think that ultimately, we have to actually assess the current situation, see where the opportunities are, and shift like our businesses, our families, and our lives have to kind of be built around those new opportunities, right? So it's tough. It's like, how do you look for opportunities without looking kind of opportunistic, like kind of you're taking advantage of the situation? But fact is, I mean, we're better as a society if we all actually figure out where the real opportunities are and move towards them, So, and I thought about it. I think I mentioned, I forgot if it's before or after you press record, but like, I feel weirdly optimistic. I don't know if it's some sort of bizarre psychology. I know that like during like the bombing of London or whatever, like people, they had set up like psych wards outside of the city, and anticipating people needing like psychological help from being constantly bombarded. But bizarrely, the psych wards were left empty, and people just went about their day. And I think there's something bizarre about like psychology during crisis. Like, even when someone close to you dies or suffers, but if you survive, you actually kind of get this euphoria. So like, anyone who's surviving in that moment, like, actually feels weirdly positive and like immune. But then like, obviously at any moment, like, it could be you, right? So I feel weirdly optimistic. I don't know if it's a psychological trick or if it's a function of Being American, where we're all just temporarily embarrassed millionaires, I think is the quote. we're all like, I'm not rich now, but I'm gonna be. This
Yeah,
So like I don't know what it is, but I feel like the dust hasn't settled, right? But I simultaneously feel the weight you're speaking about. I've got 2 kids. I bought a house last year in Berlin, and so now I've got this, like, it's the first time I've owed this much money to anybody. Like, it's and then simultaneously, like, projects are getting cut, and you're like, but if I zoom out, I do think that I'm fortunate. I can't predict the future. It might be tough for me. I don't know.